Thank you very much for your patience here and for coming to hear about the ecosystem for emerging social entrepreneurs, what we call the pathway to action. It's great to be particularly at a conference that focuses on P3 and public-private partnerships in general because it is so important to what we do. And so to illustrate that today, we're going to do something a little bit different with a panel that is very full of great insights and experience. We're going to go through 3 mini fireside chats, if you will, that will take us through the ecosystem of an emerging social enterprise and an emerging social innovator. Let's get started right now. I want to start our conversation, and we're going to have a real conversation up here, with how the best ideas in the social sector are bubbling up these days. What are you seeing in terms of how these ideas are becoming new social enterprises?
I think there's a growing number of young, driven entrepreneurs, activists, advocates in communities around the world who are looking at their societies, understanding the problems that exist, and then applying their talents, their skills to coming up with solutions. And I think there's a growth in these entrepreneurs and advocates leveraging science and technology. So you have new products coming in that address health issues and education issues, but because they're developed by local entrepreneurs, they also understand distribution and education and how do you train communities in how to use the products. And at the same time, I think there's a growth in a hybrid approach, so cutting across sectors, not just addressing problems from a nonprofit approach, but looking at a hybrid investment model, a hybrid for-profit, nonprofit model. And that's promising because that means hopefully better ideas, but also hopefully more sustainable and scalable ideas.
I would say that we're at a very interesting moment in time because we have a revolution going on in data-driven, evidence-based solutions for many of society's problems. I think there's a broad spectrum right now. On the right-hand side, you have pure profit corporations, profit-seeking corporations. On the left, you have NGOs. Then you have almost every other kind of hybrid, if you will, in between. You've got NGOs that are developing revenue-generating businesses. You have corporations that are investing in or donating into NGOs. But you also have a wide spectrum of these hybrids.
When you were writing The Path of Peers and talking to people who had just gotten off the ground and had created great organizations, were they focused on this hybrid approach? Were you seeing more and more of that? Do you feel like that's a new thing, or we're uncovering something that's been going on for a while?
Well, I don't think there's one hybrid approach. There's many, and it really depends upon the situation, upon the particular entrepreneur, upon the circumstances. So sometimes, if you're coming at it from a for-profit perspective, you might choose something because you want to be able to bring in an NGO partner. So you'll create a structure around that. If you're coming at it from the NGO perspective, you may want to actually have a subsidiary that is, a little bit more profit-oriented. So you'll create something, and there's a structure on that. So there's really no one hybrid structure. There's multiple ones. But I would say that there is still a disconnect. People in the for-profit world, the funders, who still are for-profit oriented, and although there are foundations, they are not yet on board with this kind of hybrid thing. They're just more used to funding nonprofits. But the for-profit investors are much more used to funding something with just an ROI. And the social dimension, they're thinking, well, that's nice if it's gravy, but they also don't want it to diminish the ROI. So, you've still got a little bit of a disconnect.
So Shiza, when you were getting Malala Fund off the ground, that's an NGO. Can you contrast a little bit the experience of doing that with some of the more impact investing-oriented opportunities that you're seeing today?
The Malala Fund is a nonprofit, and we started off with 2 goals. One was to advocate at a global policy level to get governments to enact the types of political changes that would enable more girls and boys to get 12 years of education. And the other was to support local community-based organizations that were creating change on the ground for girls directly. And the sources of funding that we accessed were traditional philanthropy, be it high net worth individuals, be it grants, and be it digital fundraising. We were able to mobilize young people to donate $10, $15, and do so repeatedly. that became a big part of our funding base. When I look at a lot of social entrepreneurs like the ones that Cheryl's talking about, I think it is difficult because if you're a pure nonprofit, you can tap into traditional philanthropy sources. If you're a social entrepreneur, then it's not clear where you go, and impact investors are still sort of straddling whether they focus heavily on returns or they focus heavily on social impact. And you do have a growth in early stage funding, but some of my favorite social enterprises that are actually scaling and have now raised 100 or so in venture have often exhausted the impact investing sources. There aren't a lot of low-cost debt options. And so I think it's really important to start to structure more capital to serve these solutions, because very often they are the ones that are scaling.
Yeah, I would encourage the institutional players also to make use more of program-related investments. I mean, I think that that's definitely something on people's radars, but there aren't as many deals in PRIs as one would think that could be available, because it is such a powerful model, and also I think that. The two sides are kind of, if you look at the two extremes, they're kind of suspicious of each other, and I wish that there was a little bit more interaction. There really can be such greatness that can come out of the two sides working together, whether it's an NGO and a for-profit. They really can, but right now they're kind of like dancing around each other, and I think they definitely will go to the prom, but I think that it's going to take a little bit of time.
Let's actually just play on one thing, Shiza, that you talked about. And Cheryl, I heard you talk about an emerging entrepreneur as her, and I think that's great. Especially given the context of what's going on in female founding and female investing for female founders. Could you talk a little bit, Shiza, about the work that you're doing there and what we're unlocking in terms of the potential of female founders in the social sector?
Yeah, I think there is something very exciting happening globally with more women starting companies that are highly innovative. I grew up in Pakistan and was in the Middle East when I was launching the Malala Fund, and made the deliberate decision to be based in New York because I knew that as a woman founder, I needed the networks, the visibility, the funding, the press that I could only access here. And so I think there's a real opportunity to create networks, whether it's venture capital, whether it's fellowships like Echoing Green or Ashoka, but more of them and more of them focused on women. That really hone in on this opportunity.
I also think that there definitely is a huge amount of progress. Hopefully, two things that I hope will not happen, and I don't think they're happening so much, is that the social entrepreneurs or the female entrepreneurs who have maybe a social bent to the particular venture that they're creating, aren't going to be locked out again as even if they were a purely for-profit venture in the venture capital world. It's just hard to break into that. It's hard to get when you present. It's hard for venture capitalists to really take you seriously, and so I think there's that element. The other element is that I also hope, and I don't think this is happening yet, but I just hope that it's not as though the funders will look at these female social entrepreneurs and say, well, they're doing the soft side of things. I don't know if they really can deliver on the actual product or maybe even the ROI.
And I think that's an excellent point, and it also applies to social entrepreneurs in general, right? I think over and again, we see social entrepreneurs as bleeding hearts doing good work because they care, but the most successful ones are actually the most rigorous operators that I have ever seen. So I think measuring founders by understanding their capabilities as operators is important in the social impact space.
At the very beginning, as a social entrepreneur, what are the resources? What are the things, for example, Cheryl, that you heard most from the folks that you were interviewing that were needs at the very early point?
Funds.
Okay.
Mentors who can connect.
Great. Well, with that, Cheryl and Shiza, thanks so much. We'll be back for questions later.